Mercenaries are an interesting type of character in Star Wars, blending certain aspects of pirates and bounty hunters into a new career with new ship requirements. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and these are the best ships for mercenaries in Star Wars. Volume 2. V-82 Dropship. First up is the Sinar Fleet Systems V-82 Dropship, also manufactured by Ubrikian Industries as the Imperial Troop Transport. This was a small landing craft used by the Empire throughout their reign. While not the most capable vessel, it could be useful for mercenaries in certain situations. The ship was not equipped with a hyperdrive, so it would be a good, cheap option for a mercenary group only concerned with operating within one star system, or as a landing craft for mercenaries working aboard a larger warship like how the Empire used it. We'll see a good example of one of those in a bit. The V-82 was fairly durable, likely very easy to maintain, and all around seemingly a pretty decent utility craft. You would probably have to steal one from the Empire to use it, but that should be no problem at all for a skilled mercenary group to accomplish. Though I also wouldn't be surprised if the ship was available on the civilian market as a ship's boat or orbital shuttle, as it is by far one of the most harmless vessels in the Imperial Navy. But harmless is not useless, as this would be a fantastic light transport for small groups of ground troops or equipment of any kind, including mercenaries. The V-82 measured 14 meters long by 8.2 meters wide and 3.9 meters tall. Its top atmospheric speed was probably around 500 kilometers per hour, and while it was not known to be equipped with a hyperdrive, its sister ship, the Imperial Prison Transport, did have one, so theoretically it could have a Class 2 or 3 hyperdrive that we just haven't seen yet. I don't think that is likely, but it is possible. You could probably also outfit it with a hyperdrive salvaged from an IPT, or even just use one of those ships outright instead. The V-82 required only one pilot, and could carry a very impressive 36 passengers, though probably not comfortably. It would probably also be able to carry 5 to 10 tons of cargo with no passengers aboard, if preferred. Finally, the ITT was armed with 2 twin laser cannons to clear landing zones. Considering its small size and fairly utilitarian design, the ITT probably came in at a cost of 50,000 credits new, or 20,000 used. Tri-Mark 7. Next up is the Elsinore Cordova Engineering Tri-Mark 7 Interceptor. This was an unusual multi-role starship described as being a heavy starfighter, a bomber, a light transport, and a prison ship all rolled into one. It's sort of like an alternate take on the Firespray gunship, and I like to think that it was designed as a bid for the same contract that produced that ship. The Trimark was well armed and had room for numerous troops, making it perfect for a small to medium-sized mercenary organization. It was said to be very fast as well, if that matters to you, and considering it was built by an engine and pod racer manufacturer, I would guess that this speed was quite remarkable. This would make the Trimark very good as a solo ship for a small mercenary group, enabling them to take contracts anywhere in the galaxy on very short notice. However, it would still be useful to larger organizations as well, with a squadron of them aboard a carrier being able to shred whatever threats you're hired to deal with in record time. The Tri-Mark 7 officially measured 20 meters long by 30 meters wide and 15 meters tall. I wasn't able to get it to look correct at those dimensions, so mine is a little shorter and narrower, but I assume the actual game model does line up with the official figures. The ship's speed is unknown, but I would guess it had a Class 1 hyperdrive and a top speed of at least 1,200 kilometers per hour. The ship was armed with 6 dual laser cannon turrets, arranged around the hull with surprisingly good coverage by Star Wars standards, as well as 1 concussion missile launcher. It required 3 crew, a pilot, co-pilot, and gunner, as well as 2 astromech droids for maintenance. The ship could carry 30 troops and 4 passengers, as well as 90 cubic meters of cargo and 2 weeks of consumables. Where it fits all that in a 4-meter wide hull I do not know, but it was probably not intended for permanent habitation like many other ships. Or at least not for the passengers. It probably did have simple crew quarters. The price of the Triark is unknown, but I would estimate it to be somewhere around 225,000 credits new, or 100,000 used. YV-929. For something a little more innocuous, yet somehow even more powerful, a mercenary need look no further than the Corellian Engineering Corporation YV-929 light freighter. This was a tiny cargo ship, barely a freighter at all really, and yet for some reason it was equipped with more weapons than some capital ships many times its size. It's a miracle CEC was legally allowed to sell the vessel at all, and they did get in trouble for doing so on many occasions when the wrong customer walked away with one. In addition to its weapons, the YV-929 also had very powerful shields by civilian freighter standards, which it desperately needed as its physical armor was quite weak in some places, thanks to a large parlor at the front of the ship. This space could potentially be packed with extra armor to make up for this weakness, though personally I would leave it alone and use it as a meeting room to plan missions and chat with prospective clients. The YV-929 measured 22 meters long by about 15 meters wide and 6.7 meters tall. It had a Class 2 hyperdrive and a top atmospheric speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. The ship required 1 pilot and 3 gunners, which controlled its incredible weapons loadout of 2 double turbolaser cannons, 2 ion cannons, 2 triple blasters, and 4 concussion missile launchers. It could be flown by just one if necessary, but I assume they would probably have a bit of trouble firing all that by themselves. Though on the other hand, none of them were turrets, so maybe it could all be controlled from the pilot's seat. The ship could carry 6 passengers, 3 months of consumables, and an astonishing 150 tons of cargo considering how small the ship is and how much of its volume is used up by other things. The YV-929 came in at a cost of 250,000 credits new, or 100,000 used. Sentinel shuttle. Moving on to something with a little more elbow room, another powerful ship in a different way is the Sinar Fleet System's Sentinel-class landing craft. This was one of the Empire's main transport craft, capable of everything from simple logistics duties and personnel transfers to deploying troops and ground vehicles directly into battle and providing covering fire for them. The ship had very strong armor and shields, as well as numerous concealed weapons, but its transport capabilities are of course the most useful aspect of its design. The ship could carry more cargo than most light freighters, dozens of passengers, and even land speeders or light walkers. Some interpretations of the ship include a detachable cargo pod for the walker, which seemed to carry it standing fully upright for some reason. I much prefer E.C. Henry's take on the ship, with a small notch at the back under its engines to hold 1 walker, or clamps on the bottom of the engine deck for 2. The detachable nature of the drop pod means that these 2 interpretations of the design can coexist though, and you can choose whichever method better suits your tactics, assuming you plan to carry walkers in the first place, of course. The ship's main boarding ramp was large enough to drive speeder bikes or smaller land speeders down it as well if you value speed over intimidation. It also probably wouldn't be too hard to build a docking cradle for a small starfighter like a TIE fighter or A-wing at the rear of the ship under the engine deck as well, to further expand your combat options. But the Sentinel didn't just carry cargo, walkers, and troops, it was also a heavily armed and combat-ready attack craft. It had a powerful sensor suite that included infrared imaging, motion sensors, and life-form detectors, as well as a set of powerful targeting computers to ensure precise attacks. The Empire frequently used Sentinels to provide close air support to the very same troops they just deployed, and this ability would be very useful to mercenaries as well, giving you a wider range of options for your missions. Obviously, as an Imperial vehicle, access to the Sentinel shuttle would be quite restricted, and unlike the V-82 and other Imperial transports, I doubt a civilian version existed during the time of the Empire. The ship was put on the civilian market after the Battle of Endor, though, with Sinar presumably seeing the writing on the wall for their primary customer. For mercenaries operating within the Imperial era, however, stealing one shouldn't be too hard, as the Rebel Alliance and others captured several over the course of the Galactic Civil War with little difficulty. The Sentinel-class measured 38 meters long by about 34 meters wide and 28 meters tall. It had a Class 1 hyperdrive and a top atmospheric speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. The ship was armed with 8 retractable laser cannons, 2 concussion missile launchers, 2 blaster cannon turrets, and an ion cannon turret. It required a crew of 5, a pilot, co-pilot and sensor operator, and 3 gunners. It could carry up to 75 passengers in the right configuration, as well as 180 tons of cargo and 1 month of consumables. The Sentinel could carry a variety of ground vehicles amongst its cargo in other configurations, including speeder bikes, small walkers such as the AT-ST or AT-PT, and many others. The Sentinel shuttle cost only 240,000 credits new, a pretty good deal for all its capabilities if you ask me. Its used price is unknown, but would likely have been around 100 to 120,000 credits. Marauder Corvette. And finally, one of the best ships for mercenaries in Star Wars is undoubtedly the Republic Scinar System's Marauder-class assault corvette, a fast and vicious light warship most famously used by the Corporate Sector Authority. The ship was designed shortly before the Clone Wars with intent to sell them to the Galactic Republic, but after the Republic rejected the vessel, Scinar instead put it on the civilian market, where it sold quite poorly. The model was discontinued after a while, but the CSA purchased the rights to the design entirely and began manufacturing it themselves for their own purposes. The Marauder was fairly well armed for its size, and had mounting points for additional weapons if the ship's reactor was upgraded to power them. This partially contributed to the ship's colloquial reputation as a pocket cruiser, but a bigger part of that was its oversized embarked craft complement. Perhaps pocket carrier would be a better description, as the Marauder was capable of carrying an entire squadron of 12 starfighters, as well as 4 shuttles and 2 landing craft. The Marauder under corporate sector use would have operated it with their IRD starfighters, but I didn't really have time to make a model of those at the moment, so I've swapped them out for TIE fighters instead, which I think would also be a plausible complement considering how closely the CSA worked with the Empire. I don't know if this hangar design would work with the IRD starfighters or not, but the Empire's highly space-efficient TIE fighters can be held in Gozanti-style overhead racks in the ship's ventral docking bay, with plenty of room to spare. I don't believe we know what shuttles or landing craft it was meant to carry, but I put in docking clamps for 2 V-82 dropships behind them, and then a proper, if tiny, hangar behind that for 4 Iota-class shuttles, sort of like the secondary hangar in the back wall of an Imperial Star Destroyer's ventral docking bay. The V-82 dropships would need to be boarded through the roof hatch they appear to have in the cockpit at the top, but this seemed like an acceptable compromise to avoid having to gut basically the entire ship to make the hangar big enough to fit them. And before you ask, yes, there is just enough room left in the center for a shuttle to sneak out between them. Let me know if you'd like to see a full breakdown video of this ship in the future. I have a lot more to say about the operations of this hangar that I think you would be interested in, but I think that's a bit beyond the scope of this video. Obviously, none of those ships existed yet when the Marauder was designed in-universe, and only the TIEs existed then out-of-universe, but for a modern interpretation of the Marauder, this would not only be a perfectly reasonable complement, but really the only one that would work. The Iota is one of the smallest shuttles in Star Wars, which would need to be the case for a Marauder to carry 4 of them. There are other small landing craft that could be used instead of the V-82s, but since I was already including them in the video, I figured I may as well use them as the Marauder's landing craft. The V-82 also sort of matches the Han Solo and the Corporate Sector sourcebook's description of the ship's landing craft as being an armored repulsor transport with artillery batteries, as long as you count the mortar trooper carried aboard one in The Mandalorian. In addition to its embarked craft capacity, the Marauder was also well armed for ship-to-ship combat, and carried a large number of troops for ground operations or boarding action. It had fairly powerful sensors capable of making a rudimentary scan of an entire star system looking for suspicious vessels in a relatively short time. The Marauder corvette measured 195 meters long by about 130 to 150 meters wide, and 20 to 30 meters tall, depending on the illustration. Of course, many of them incorrectly depict it as being around starfighter-sized, not that I blame them, but that's a story for another time. The ship had a Class II hyperdrive and a top atmospheric speed of 850 km per hour. It was armed with 8 double turbolaser cannons, 2 on each side, and the front and back. Basically none of its official depictions actually reflect this, but mine does. Again though, we'll save that discussion for a dedicated video another day. It also carried 3 highly accurate tractor beam projectors, and had mounting points for 4 additional turbolasers to be installed if you also upgrade the ship's power plant. Some Marauder captains, such as those of the Rebel Alliance, preferred instead to replace all of the ship's weapons with 4 diamond boron missile launchers, a large, long-range, optionally guided munition. I don't see why you couldn't also keep some or all of the turbolasers while doing this, but perhaps there's a good reason for this. Who knows? Well, I know. The reason was game balance in Empire at War. But that's not a fun answer. Anyway, the Marauder required a total of 177 crew, including 129 regular personnel and 48 gunners. It could carry 80 passengers, 300 tons of cargo, and 3 months of consumables, as well as the aforementioned fighters, shuttles, and dropships. Finally, the Marauder cost just 2.4 million credits new or 1.45 million used. A pretty good deal considering everything it could do. And those are 5 more of the best ships for mercenaries in Star Wars. Please let me know which of these you would choose, or what else you would have selected instead, and take a look at the first installment for 5 more options. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.